The fluorescent lights in my basement flickered as I heard footsteps on the wooden stairs. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not Dr. Helen Morrison, my physician of 12 years. She'd insisted on a home visit to check my blood pressure after some unusual readings at her office 3 weeks prior. I'd agreed reluctantly, knowing full well what she'd see down here if she wandered too far from the makeshift examination area I'd set up near the washer and dryer. "Steve, where's your restroom?" she called out, her voice echoing against the concrete walls. "Upstairs, first door on your left," I responded, hoping she'd take the hint and stay out of my organized chaos. But Helen was curious by nature, a trait that made her an excellent diagnostician, but a terrible guest when it came to respecting boundaries. I heard her heels click against the linoleum floor as she moved deeper into the basement instead of heading upstairs. My jaw tightened. The storage shelves lined the entire western wall, floor to ceiling, meticulously organized with clear plastic bins labeled in black permanent marker. Insulin, antibiotics, blood pressure medications, painkillers, inhalers, EpiPens, diabetes supplies. Everything rotated, dated, checked monthly for expiration. "Steve, what on earth is all this?" Her voice carried a mixture of shock and something else. Concern, maybe, or judgment disguised as medical professionalism. I set down the blood pressure cuff I'd been adjusting and walked over to where she stood, her eyes wide, scanning the shelves like she'd discovered a crime scene. "It's exactly what it looks like, Helen. Medications, supplies." She turned to face me, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the harsh basement light. At 53, Dr. Helen Morrison was the picture of modern medicine. Confident, educated, always relying on systems and institutions she believed would never fail. Her white coat was spotless, her stethoscope hanging around her neck like a symbol of authority. "Steve, this is excessive. You have enough medication here to run a small pharmacy. Are you taking all of these?" I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that came whenever someone questioned my methods, my preparation, my understanding of how fragile everything truly was. 30 years as an industrial engineer for a pharmaceutical supply chain had taught me things most people preferred not to know. I rotate them. I keep a 6-month supply of my prescriptions, plus extras of essentials. Insulin for diabetics, antibiotics for infections, pain management for emergencies. Everything is legal, properly stored, temperature controlled where necessary. Helen's expression shifted from shock to what I can only describe as pity mixed with alarm. She crossed her arms, the way doctors do when they're about to deliver bad news, or in this case, unsolicited psychological analysis. "Steve, you don't need to do this. You know that, right? We have pharmacies on every corner. CVS, Walgreens, they're open 24 hours. And if there's ever a shortage of something specific, we have medical networks, distribution systems. This," she gestured broadly at my shelves, "this looks like hoarding behavior. I'm concerned about you. Have you talked to anyone about anxiety? Maybe we should consider—" "I'm not anxious, Helen. I'm prepared. There's a difference." She smiled, but it was the kind of smile you give to a child who insists monsters live under the bed. Patronizing, dismissive. "Steve, I understand you worked in logistics and I respect that you like to plan ahead. But this crosses a line. Medical stockpiling can indicate deeper psychological issues, fear of scarcity, control issues, sometimes even early signs of obsessive-compulsive patterns. As your doctor, I think we should schedule a psychiatric evaluation. There's no shame in it. Mental health is just as important as physical health." The air between us grew thick with unspoken tension. I'd heard variations of this speech before, from my ex-wife Linda, from neighbors who'd glimpsed inside my garage, from the pharmacist who raised eyebrows when I requested refills exactly on schedule, every single month, never missing a rotation. But hearing it from Helen, someone I'd trusted with my health for over a decade, cut deeper than I expected. "I appreciate your concern," I said slowly, choosing each word with care. "But I'm not mentally ill. I'm a man who understands supply chains, manufacturing vulnerabilities, and just-in-time delivery systems that operate on razor-thin margins. One disruption, Helen. That's all it takes. One factory shutdown, one contamination issue, one transportation strike, and suddenly your 24-hour pharmacy has empty shelves. Helen reached out and placed her hand on my shoulder, the gesture meant to be comforting but feeling condescending instead. Steve, that's not going to happen. We have regulations, oversight. The FDA monitors everything. You're catastrophizing a scenario that isn't realistic. Please, talk to Dr. Sanders in our psychiatry department. I'll make the referral myself. You don't have to live with this kind of fear. I pulled away gently, putting distance between us. I'm not living in fear, Helen. I'm living in reality, but I appreciate you stopping by. My blood pressure is fine, by the way. Probably steadier than yours right now. She didn't laugh. Instead, she gathered her bag, her professional demeanor cracking just slightly to reveal genuine worry. Or was it judgment? Sometimes those two emotions look identical on people's faces. I'm documenting this visit in your file, Steve. Not to punish you, but because I care about your well-being. If you change your mind about speaking with someone, please call me. Anytime. She left without finishing the examination, her heels clicking back up the stairs faster than they'd come down. I heard the front door close with a decisive thud, and then silence filled the basement again. I stood there among my organized shelves, among my preparations that had taken years to build and maintain, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Doubt. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was obsessing over disasters that would never come. Maybe my years in logistics had warped my perspective, made me see vulnerabilities where others saw stability. I pushed the thought away and returned to checking expiration dates on the insulin vials, rotating the oldest stock to the front. Whether Helen understood or not, whether anyone understood or not, I'd keep doing what I knew was right. 3 weeks passed. Life moved on with its predictable rhythm. I went to the hardware store, restocked my water purification tablets, checked inventory, maintained my rotations. The world outside remained blissfully unaware, comfortably numb, confidently dependent on systems they'd never questioned. Then came the news alert on a Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee on my back porch when my phone buzzed with a notification from the pharmaceutical industry newsletter I'd subscribed to since retirement. The headline made my blood run cold. Major contamination event. Shuts down Apex Pharmaceuticals' primary manufacturing facility. 40% of U.S. antibiotic and insulin production affected. I clicked through to read the full report. Apex Pharmaceuticals, one of the 3 largest drug manufacturers in North America, had discovered bacterial contamination in their sterile production line. The FDA had ordered an immediate shutdown pending a full investigation. Production estimates suggested a minimum 8 to 12-week delay before operations could resume. The article quoted industry experts saying not to worry, that other manufacturers would compensate, that supply chains were resilient. But I knew better. I knew that pharmaceutical manufacturing operated on consolidated production models. I knew that profit margins drove companies to centralize, to eliminate redundancy, to run just-in-time delivery systems with minimal warehouse inventory. If Apex was down, 40% of production capacity had just vanished overnight. And the remaining manufacturers were already operating at capacity, unable to absorb the sudden demand spike that was coming. I set my coffee down and went back inside to check my basement inventory. Insulin, I had 6 vials properly refrigerated, plus another 8 in the backup freezer, converted to stable cold storage. Antibiotics, 3 different types, all within expiration dates, enough to handle common infections for at least 3 people for several months. Blood pressure medication, diabetes supplies, pain management, respiratory treatments. The doubt Helen had planted 3 weeks ago evaporated completely. I wasn't crazy. I was right. And in approximately 72 hours, every person who'd laughed at my excessive preparation was going to discover exactly what happens when the systems they trusted implicitly failed them completely. By Wednesday afternoon, the local news picked up the story. By Thursday morning, the first pharmacy in town posted a sign, "Temporary shortage of insulin and select antibiotics, working to restock soon." By Friday, 3 more pharmacies displayed similar notices. By the following Monday, panic began to set in. My phone rang at 11 in the morning. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. "Steve?" The voice was shaking, barely recognizable. "Steve, it's Helen. Dr. Morrison. I need to talk to you. Can I come by?" I gripped the phone tighter, a dozen responses racing through my mind. The vindication I thought I'd feel in this moment was absent, replaced by something heavier, sadder. "Of course, Helen. Come by whenever you need." She arrived 30 minutes later, and I barely recognized her. The confident physician who'd stood in my basement 3 weeks prior was gone. In her place stood a woman with dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her hands trembling as she rang my doorbell. By the way, if you've ever experienced something like what Helen is going through, realizing too late that preparation matters, please subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. It helps us share real stories that might just save someone's life when systems fail. Now, back to what happened next. I opened the door and gestured for her to come inside. She stepped in slowly, her eyes avoiding mine, her whole body language screaming defeat and desperation in equal measure. "Steve, I don't know where else to turn." "Sit down, Helen. Tell me what's happening." She collapsed onto my couch, her professional composure completely shattered. When she finally looked up at me, I saw tears threatening to spill over. "It's my father. He's 79, diabetic for 23 years. He needs insulin to survive, Lantus specifically. He ran out 3 days ago. I've called every pharmacy within 50 miles. Nobody has any. They don't know when they'll get more. The hospital is rationing their supply for current inpatients only. I called my colleagues, other doctors, anyone with connections, nothing. Steve, he's already starting to show symptoms of hyperglycemia. His blood sugar this morning was over 400. If I can't find insulin in the next 48 hours..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I stood there looking at this woman who'd questioned my sanity just weeks before, now broken and desperate in my living room. The old part of me, the part that had been ridiculed, dismissed, labeled paranoid, wanted to say something cutting, wanted to remind her of every condescending word she'd spoken in my basement, wanted to ask her how those 24-hour pharmacies were working out for her now. But that anger died the moment I saw her face. This wasn't about being right or proving a point. This was about a 79-year-old man whose only crime was trusting that the system his daughter believed in would never fail him. "What's his name?" I asked quietly. Robert Morrison. He's a veteran, Steve. Career. He survived war, raised 3 kids on a factory worker's salary, never complained about anything. And now he's sitting in his apartment, rationing the last drops of insulin he scraped from used vials, trying to stretch it another day. I'm his daughter. I'm a doctor. And I can't save him. Her voice cracked on those last words, and the tears finally came. I handed her a tissue from the box on the side table and sat down across from her. "Helen, I need you to listen carefully. Your father's insulin, Lantus, you said." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I have it. 4 vials, properly refrigerated, checked last week. Expiration date 8 months out. They're his. You can take them right now." Helen's head snapped up, her expression cycling through disbelief, hope, shame, and relief so quickly I could barely track it. You have Lantus, but you're not diabetic. Why would you?" "Because I understood that emergencies don't discriminate. Because I knew that when systems fail, it's the people with chronic conditions who suffer first. I keep insulin, inhalers, EpiPens, blood pressure medications, anything that keeps people alive when pharmacies can't. I've spent 15 years building relationships with doctors who understand preparation, getting legitimate prescriptions for emergency supplies, rotating stock, maintaining proper storage. Not for profit, not for power, for moments exactly like this one." She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I called you crazy, Steve. I told you you needed psychiatric help. I documented it in your medical file, and now you're offering to save my father's life after I humiliated you." I leaned forward, my voice firm but not unkind. "Helen, I'm not doing this to make you feel guilty. I'm doing this because your father deserves to live, and I have the means to help. But I need you to understand something. This shortage is just beginning. Insulin is only the start. Within 2 weeks, you're going to see antibiotic shortages, blood pressure medications, respiratory treatments, everything Apex manufactured, and people are going to die because they didn't prepare, because they trusted blindly, because nobody taught them that faith in systems isn't the same as wisdom. She looked up at me, her eyes red but clearing, her doctor's mind starting to re-engage despite the emotional chaos. How bad is this going to get? Worse than anyone's admitting. The news is still downplaying it, telling people not to panic, promising solutions that can't materialize in time. But I've worked in this industry, Helen. I know the production timelines, the regulatory approval processes, the manufacturing bottlenecks. We're looking at minimum 3 months of severe shortages, possibly longer. And that's assuming no additional disruptions, no panic buying, no secondary supply chain failures. Helen stood up abruptly, her professional instincts finally overriding her personal crisis. I need to warn people, my patients, the hospital, the medical community. If what you're saying is true, they won't listen, I interrupted. Not yet. Not until the crisis becomes undeniable. You know how institutions work. They'll form committees, issue statements, promise solutions, and tell everyone to remain calm while people die waiting for medications that aren't coming. She paced across my living room, her mind clearly racing through scenarios, calculating timelines, assessing risks. Then what do we do? I can't just watch my patients suffer. There are diabetics, heart patients, people with COPD who need daily medications to breathe. If the pharmacies are empty for months, we help who we can with what we have for as long as it lasts. But Helen, you need to understand the limits. I have supplies, but they're finite. I can help your father. I can probably help a few others with critical needs, but I can't supply the entire city. Nobody can. She stopped pacing and turned to face me, and I saw something shift in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. You've been preparing for this for years. You tried to tell people, didn't you? And everyone called you paranoid. Not everyone. There are others like me scattered throughout the community, quiet people who keep supplies, who rotate stock, who understand that self-reliance isn't selfishness. But yes, most people laughed. Most people thought I was mentally ill for not trusting systems that had never failed them before. Until now. Helen sat back down, her energy suddenly depleted. What do you need from me? I need you to verify medical need. I'm not running a black market. I won't give medications to people who are stockpiling out of panic while someone with a genuine medical emergency goes without. You're a doctor. You can assess who truly needs help and who's just afraid. Can you do that? She nodded slowly. And I need you to understand that this changes nothing about how I live. When this crisis passes, and it will eventually pass, people will forget. They'll go back to trusting systems, to mocking preparation, to believing that it can't happen again. I'll still be the crazy guy in the basement with too many medications. I need you to be okay with that. Steve, after this, I don't think I'll ever see preparation the same way again. I walked to my basement door and gestured for her to follow. We descended the stairs together, but this time there was no judgment in her eyes, only profound respect mixed with regret. I opened my medication refrigerator, the one I'd converted specifically for insulin storage, maintaining precise temperature control between 36 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit. 4 vials of Lantus sat in their designated section, each labeled with acquisition date and expiration. Take all 4, I said, handing them to her carefully. That's about a 4-month supply for your father if he's on a standard dose. By then, hopefully production will have resumed. She took the vials like they were made of glass and gold, cradling them against her chest. How much do I owe you? These are expensive, I know that. You don't owe me anything, Helen, but I'll ask you for something more valuable than money. She looked at me, waiting. When this is over, when your father is stable and the pharmacies restock, and everyone pretends this was just a minor inconvenience, I want you to remember this moment. Remember what it felt like to be helpless, to watch someone you love suffer because the systems you trusted failed. And I want you to teach your patients about preparation. Not hoarding, not panic buying, but intelligent, responsible medical preparedness. keeping a 30-day supply of critical medications, rotating stock, understanding their prescriptions and having backup plans. Can you do that?" Tears were streaming down her face again, but she was smiling now. "I promise, Steve. I absolutely promise." Over the next 6 weeks, Helen kept that promise in ways I never anticipated. She became an advocate, quietly at first, helping me identify patients with genuine critical needs. A 64-year-old woman named Margaret with severe asthma, whose inhaler supply had run dry. A young father, 32, with a heart condition requiring daily medication to prevent arrhythmia. An elderly veteran like her own father, managing diabetes and hypertension simultaneously, watching his medication cabinet empty day by day. Together, we created a system. Helen would assess medical necessity, verify diagnoses, confirm that patients had exhausted all legitimate channels. I would provide what I could from my supplies, always carefully rationed, always documented, always with the understanding that we were buying time, not solving the crisis. My basement, once a source of mockery, became a lifeline for 17 people during those desperate weeks. 17 human beings who would have suffered severe medical complications, possibly death, if not for the excessive preparations Helen had ridiculed just 2 months earlier. But the shortage affected more than just my small circle of helped individuals. The city descended into a kind of quiet panic that the news refused to acknowledge honestly. Pharmacies posted apologetic signs explaining delays. Hospitals implemented strict rationing protocols, prioritizing critical surgeries and emergency cases while turning away patients with chronic conditions. Support groups formed on social media, people desperately trading medications, sharing half-doses, stretching supplies in dangerous ways. I watched people I'd known for years reveal themselves in crisis. Some showed incredible generosity, sharing what little they had. Others hoarded viciously, buying up anything available regardless of personal need, reselling at inflated prices to desperate families. The crisis stripped away social pretenses and revealed the raw truth of human nature under pressure. One afternoon, about 7 weeks into the shortage, Helen called me with unusual urgency in her voice. "Steve, I need you to come to my office. Today, if possible. There's someone I want you to meet." An hour later, I sat in a private conference room at her medical practice. Helen entered with 2 other people, Dr. Marcus Chen, a pulmonologist I recognized from the local hospital, and Sarah Hendricks, a pharmacist who'd been quoted in several news articles about the shortage. "Steve," Helen began, her tone formal but warm, "I've been talking with Marcus and Sarah about what we've been doing, about your preparation model, your rotation system, your understanding of supply vulnerabilities, and we think there's an opportunity here to create something that outlasts this crisis." Dr. Chen leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Mr. Brennan, Steve, I'll be direct. I called you paranoid 6 months ago when Helen mentioned your medication stockpile during a hospital committee meeting. I assumed you were either reselling illegally or suffering from anxiety disorders. I was wrong, catastrophically wrong, and now I'm watching patients deteriorate because I taught them to trust a system without teaching them to prepare for its failure." Sarah, the pharmacist, nodded in agreement. The pharmaceutical industry has been operating on razor-thin margins for decades, centralizing production, eliminating redundancy, prioritizing profit over resilience. We've all known this intellectually, but we convinced ourselves it would never actually break. "Steve, you didn't convince yourself of that comfortable lie. You stayed rational when everyone else chose convenient delusion." Helen placed a folder on the table between us. "We want to create a community medical preparedness program, free educational workshops teaching people how to maintain responsible medication reserves, how to rotate stock, how to communicate with their doctors about getting appropriate prescriptions for emergency supplies. We want to normalize medical preparedness the way we've normalized having first aid kits or fire extinguishers. Not hoarding, not panic, just intelligent, compassionate readiness." I looked at the 3 of them, these medical professionals who represented the very system that had dismissed me, now asking for my help to rebuild trust through education and preparation. "What do you need from me?" Marcus spoke next. "Your expertise, your system, your willingness to teach others what you know. We'll handle the medical side, the prescriptions, the professional legitimacy. But we need someone who understands logistics, supply chains, proper storage, rotation schedules, someone who's lived this philosophy long enough to teach it credibly. For the first time in 30 years, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my early career: validation. Not the bitter vindication of being proven right during crisis, but genuine recognition that my skills, my knowledge, my preparation had value beyond my own survival. "I'll help, on one condition." "Name it," Helen said. "We make this about community resilience, not individual survival. We teach people that preparation isn't about outlasting your neighbors, it's about having enough to help when systems fail. We build networks, not bunkers. We create collective security, not isolated hoarding. Can you commit to that philosophy?" All three of them nodded without hesitation. The program launched 8 weeks after the shortage began, right as Apex Pharmaceuticals finally received FDA approval to restart limited production. Our first workshop drew 43 people, mostly older adults with chronic conditions, a few younger parents with medically fragile children, and surprisingly, 2 other physicians from Helen's hospital. I taught them about medication storage requirements, temperature sensitivity, expiration date interpretation, rotation systems that prevented waste. Helen taught them how to talk to their doctors about emergency prescriptions, how to assess genuine medical need versus anxiety-driven hoarding. Sarah explained pharmacy supply chains, manufacturer diversification, and how to identify when shortages were developing before they became critical. The workshops grew. 43 became 87, then 132. Local news finally covered the program, though they still couldn't quite bring themselves to call it preparedness. They used terms like medication management education and chronic illness planning workshops. Helen's father, Robert, attended every single session. He'd become something of a symbol for the program, a man who'd nearly died because his family trusted systems without question, now advocating loudly for responsible preparation. He'd sit in the front row, his insulin pump visible on his belt, and tell his story to anyone who'd listen. "I fought in Korea," he'd say in his gravelly voice, "watched men die from wounds, from cold, from circumstances we couldn't control. But I almost died in my own apartment in peacetime America because my daughter and I believed pharmacies would always have medicine. That's not Korean artillery that nearly killed me. That's complacency. That's faith without wisdom. Don't make our mistake." 3 months after the crisis began, pharmacy shelves started restocking. Insulin appeared first, then antibiotics, then the other critical medications. The shortage didn't end all at once. It faded gradually over 6 weeks, until finally the emergency was declared over. And just as I'd predicted to Helen, most people forgot almost immediately. Within 2 months of the pharmacies restocking, attendance at our workshops dropped by 60%. The local news stopped covering medical preparedness. Social media groups dedicated to medication trading and shortage updates went quiet, then dissolved. People returned to their comfortable assumption that it had been a one-time aberration, an unlikely coincidence that wouldn't repeat. But not everyone forgot. Helen's father maintained a 3-month insulin supply, rotated religiously. Margaret, the asthma patient I'd helped, kept backup inhalers and taught her entire family her emergency protocols. The young father with the heart condition started a neighborhood preparedness group that met monthly. And Helen herself transformed her entire medical practice, making medication preparedness education a standard part of every patient visit. 1 year after the shortage, Helen invited me to speak at a regional medical conference about supply chain vulnerabilities in healthcare. I stood at a podium facing 200 physicians, nurses, pharmacists, and hospital administrators, the very people whose institutions had failed so catastrophically. I told them the truth they didn't want to hear. That consolidation creates fragility, that efficiency and resilience are often inversely related, that just-in-time delivery works beautifully until it doesn't, that teaching patients to prepare isn't causing panic, it's teaching wisdom. Some walked out, some shook their heads dismissively, but some, maybe 30 or 40, stayed afterward to ask questions, to learn, to admit they'd been wrong about people like me. Helen found me in the hallway after the talk. "You know, most of them will ignore everything you said." "I know, but 30 people listened. 30 people might teach their patients differently. 30 people might prepare their own families. That's 30 more than last year." She smiled, that same warm smile I'd seen in my basement a year earlier, but without the condescension this time. "You saved my father's life, Steve. Not just with insulin, but by teaching me that the world isn't as stable as I wanted to believe. I was arrogant. I thought my medical degree made me wise when really it just made me educated. Wisdom is different. Wisdom is understanding that systems fail, that institutions make mistakes, that preparation isn't paranoia, it's responsibility." I thought about that word, responsibility. It captured something essential that most people missed about preparation. It wasn't about fear. It wasn't about not trusting others. It was about taking responsibility for your own survival and having enough left over to help others when their systems failed them. 2 years later, the program we started now serves 4 counties. We've trained over 800 people in medical preparedness. We've created resource networks where people with similar chronic conditions share information, support each other, and maintain small group emergency supplies. We've lobbied successfully for legislation allowing pharmacies to fill slightly larger prescriptions for patients with documented chronic conditions. And my basement, it still has those same shelves, still carefully organized, still religiously maintained. Helen still visits occasionally, but now she brings her own rotation questions, her own supply management challenges, her own preparedness concerns. The doubts I felt after her first visit, the moment I wondered if maybe everyone else was right and I was crazy, those doubts are gone now. Not because I was vindicated, not because I got to be right, but because I understand now that preparation isn't about being proven right in crisis. It's about being useful when others suffer. It's about having something to give when giving matters most. Robert Morrison turned 81 last month. He's still alive because someone he never met kept insulin in a basement refrigerator just in case. That's what preparation really means. Being ready to help people you might never know need help. The world outside my window looks stable again. Pharmacies are stocked. Supply chains hum along smoothly. People have returned to their comfortable assumptions that everything will always work the way it's supposed to. And somewhere, right now, someone is probably calling someone else paranoid for keeping extra medication in their basement. That's okay. Let them laugh. Let them question. Let them call it excessive. Because when the next shortage comes, and it will come, because fragile systems always break eventually, there will be people who remember, people who prepared, people who can help. And maybe, just maybe, a few more people will have learned that the real illness isn't being prepared for disaster. The real illness is being so comfortable with stability that you can't imagine it ending. I'm Steve Brennan. I'm 68 years old. I keep medications in my basement and I'm not crazy, I'm responsible. That's the difference that saves lives. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been called paranoid for preparing, or if you've realized too late that you should have been ready, leave a comment sharing your moment of understanding. Subscribe to this channel to hear more stories about people who prepared when others didn't, and the lessons they learned. Hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to understand that preparation isn't paranoia. It's wisdom disguised as caution in a world that punishes readiness until the moment it desperately needs it.